High-frequency indicators suggest that economic momentum is sustaining even as, I agree, pain points remain. Professor Mehrotra, some of those pain points I'm sure you will elucidate upon, but the fact is that the general direction of the economy seems to be treading an upward trajectory, which can only mean that we as a nation, all its people, will benefit.
Well, we hope so, because clearly for the last few years we know perfectly well that it has been a K-shaped recovery. And if we have become the fastest growing large economy in the world, we know that we have. We should never forget that for 20 years we were the second fastest growing large economy in the world. We became the fastest only because China has slowed. We can go into the reasons, we don't have the time for that. So if we have, in terms of having become the fastest growing, well, we have a much lower base than China. We have no choice but to grow fast. And in 15 or 17 years, our demographic dividend is going to run out. So let's return to the reality of the economy. Investment was mentioned. So let's remember what this government inherited, and it inherited a 31% to GDP investment rate. It has never gone back to that level, and the growth rate on average for the last 9 years has been 5.7%. Even it went down from what it inherited to 26% most recently, but it has now risen back up to 29%, despite the rise in public investment that, of course, previous speakers have spoken about. The fact of the matter is that private investment is not happening, which is why we are still stuck at 29% of GDP. And in manufacturing, we know perfectly well that the manufacturing sector capacity utilization is below 75%, and no new private investment is going to come as a result of that. Even in respect of public investment, we know that a fiscally constrained government has drawn on surpluses from the public sector undertakings and also from the RBI, and actually increased public investment, which has resulted in it's essentially substitution and replacement for investment that might have taken place by the PSUs and also by the state governments, because the state governments are not being able to invest for a variety of reasons that I could go into, but I want to keep to jump to a few other points that you made, and I think I was taking notes when you were speaking. Let's just remember that in the open unemployment rate was the highest in 2017-18 in the preceding 45 years. Mm-hmm. Since that time, you have just told us in recent times, precisely when the economy has slowed, the labor force participation has risen and and unemployment has come down. Well, let me explain how this paradox is happening. That it's happening we have to look at below the level of this so-called decline in unemployment and increase in WPR. First, there's been a dramatic increase in self-employed people and a very large share at the expense of regular employment. PLFS is telling us this. The government's own data is telling us this. Systematically for the last several years, regular jobs have fallen. And what has taken its place? Poor quality self-employment. Within self-employment, unpaid family labor has shot up. Women who were outside the labor force have come back into the labor force as unpaid family labor, and that's showing up as quote-unquote employment. So if unemployment has fallen, it's because of this, mainly. Let's come to the issue of inequality. Most recent data, I think, is the following. You mentioned vehicles. Well, SUV purchases have gone up, but two-wheelers and smallest, entry-level four-wheelers are not going up. Point one. Even for FMCG, we know perfectly well that the HUL, the Hindustan Lever chairman, recently said that, rural demand is not growing. The sachets that they sell, well, that's not increasing. You mentioned construction. Sales have increased in 7 major cities. Is 7 major cities all the construction sector of this country? The rest of the country is the major sector.
Okay.
Major absorber of construction.
So let's go point
construction
by point.
Has increased. I'm not denying that. Construction and manufacturing.
Okay.
Manufacturing, my friend, actually had fallen from a contribution of 17% of GDP that this government inherited, and it came down to 13%. It has only just climbed back up. So, and at the same time, the share of agriculture in employment shot up in this government in the last 4 years from 42% where it had fallen in 18 to 46% in 22-23.
Okay.
Sir,
okay.
Let's just remember there's been massive reverse migration. Those workers have not come out of there. Some people have come out,
okay.
and that's why real
okay,
wages
let's break
have
this
been
down. Let's we have time. Mr. Mehrotra, we have time, so I'll come back to you. Let's just break this down. Let me bring in Mr. Garg. Mr. Garg, there's a big conversation first about private investments. Mr. Mehrotra, Professor Mehrotra is very convinced it's not happening at the level that it could have. We've never recovered to that 31% GDP level that we saw perhaps in the UPA years. I think that's what he was mentioning. Can you elaborate on this? Why is this the case?
Rahul, before I come to this, let me just make a point about the growth story.
Sure.
In 2019, the government decided to make $5 trillion economy as a goal by 24-25. At that time, we were about 2.7 or $2.8 trillion. And in 5 years, we had expected to reach to 5 trillion. That is not happening. We are only at about 3.6, 3.7 at this end of this year. We will miss 24-25. We'll probably get to 5 trillion by 26-27. And also remember that in the meantime, dollar has also depreciated. So if we take the $29, we will reach at 5 trillion only in 27-28. I am very optimistic. I wrote this book, $10 trillion Dream, because I know India need to grow at about 10 to 11% in dollar terms per annum to be able to double this income every 5 or 6 years to become $10 trillion economy by 2035. Now, when we have this conversation that the kind of growth we have been able to achieve, like this year, 6.5%. If you take 5 years, including the contraction of 2021, we'll be having growth of only about 4% per annum. And that if we sort of try to project as something which is we have done great, I think that is where the problem lies. We should be very, very close to the ground. We should be very sort of conscious of what actually is happening. And if that is what guides our discussion, we perhaps are not doing that well as we need to do. America, UK, France, they are not our competitors any longer. They've grown up, they're advanced economies, their populations have started declining. They've been growing at 2 to 3%, 4% for many years now. They are not growing at 7, 8%. China has come down now to about 5% growth rate. And we need to grow. We are a very low economy. We need to compare with ourselves, Vietnam's and other countries where we are not actually growing that fast to them. We're not growing as fast as our neighbor. Bangladesh is growing. Now, so let me come to